All right, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back once again to the only coast to coast radio show all about the information economy. It's called Inside Analysis, sister show to DM Radio. And today we're going to dive, guess what, into Gen AI. Once again, we're going to talk about generative AI use cases, real world use cases. Where is this stuff working? Where is it already getting things done? How does that happen? And what's the value that accrues? Maybe we'll talk about a hurdle or two. And we're going to talk about external facing Gen AI and internal facing Gen AI. So how you use it for your clients, for your customers, your partners, but also how you use it internally to help with your job. So first we'll talk to Erica Schroeder. She's the CMO over at Symphony AI. And later on in the show, we'll bring in Sarah Jolly, also from Symphony AI. And I'll just throw out a couple quick comments about what this stuff all boils down to, what it is. I can tell you I've been through a lot of fads in my job here covering the data space. I remember when big data took off. I remember data warehousing, how it took off, data visualization, all these different things have taken off, and they're all still here. Some of that stuff is under the covers now. Some doesn't get talked about so much. Hadoop was a bit of a left turn that we all took, but we made it through those days. We made it through those years and learned a lot about distributed computing. But this next generation of technologies, Gen AI, quite frankly, it's the biggest shift that I've seen. And I think it is going to require a significant amount of effort for organizations to understand what it is, to adopt these technologies, and to figure out what is your stack going to look like? How are you going to do these things? There are companies building their own models. You can do that. Shortly after Databricks bought Mosaic ML, I had Naveen Rao, their CEO, on the show, and he was telling me that they tell their customers it is not that hard to build your own models. So I think we will see some of that going on. Probably most people are going to be using ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude from Anthropic or some of these other off the shelf, if you will, type of solutions as cloud providers. And then you have to come up with your RAG model, your retrieval augmented generation. And I tell people just about every software company in the world, enterprise software company, is going to have to figure out where they're going to fit into this new world because it is game changing and it has really captured the imagination for sure of business leaders. But a lot of people still don't know exactly what these things are and what they do. So we're going to try to figure that out today. So with that, Erica Schroeder, I'll bring you into Inside Analysis. Symphony AI, you folks have a bunch of different co-pilots, right? Tell us about what you've got
Yeah,
going over there and how you're focused on Gen AI.
yeah, thanks. And thanks for having us. It's good to get to talk with you and talk
Yeah,
about AI. We're pretty
yeah.
excited about it. So we've got about 3, 4 dozen AI products out in the market today. We started rolling out co-pilots a little over a year ago, and we've got 8 in the market and more on the way. And the way that we offer them is they're designed for specific use cases in specific industries. We operate in 5 vertical industries today. And I can give you some examples of them, but basically our co-pilots are designed to help workers with specific parts of their jobs to make them easier, to make workers more productive, to make their work more satisfying. We talk about a human being in the loop. We can talk more about that if you like, in terms of what information a co-pilot offers and how it operates. But basically, the idea is to give workers something that is not horizontal AI. It's not ChatGPT. It's something that's very tuned and optimized for their specific use case, for their specific workflow, for their specific industry.
Mhm.
So we have co-pilots that operate in financial services to help financial crime investigators investigate cases. We have co-pilots that work in retail CPG to help supply chain managers and category managers get insights and make better decisions and operate faster. Co-pilots for manufacturing and industrial use cases. So people working in manufacturing plants, safety and equipment operators, enterprise IT managers, and people like you and me who have IT questions, and the list goes on and on. But basically, the idea is the co-pilots are tuned and optimized for those workflows and for those use cases to help workers do their work better.
Yeah, I can tell you, I think that is a fantastic approach, and the successful companies in this space are doing exactly that because, I mean, I can tell you a bunch of funny stories about the large language models, but the fact that you say
Yep.
human in the loop is really important because I think one of the misconceptions is that, oh, we'll just get an AI and it'll take care of everything. It's like, no, you do not want to do
Yeah,
that.
no, no. I see that for sure in the general purpose tools, and Sarah will talk about this and how we're using tools internally to help us do our jobs better. But basically, what we have found and worked very quickly to address is, the needs of somebody who's investigating a potential criminal activity in a bank is very different than the needs of somebody who's a category manager for cereal for a big CPG manufacturer. And that's sort of obvious when you say it, but when you think about everything that's entailed to build and tailor and tune a large language model for financial crime prevention versus retail category management, you start to understand some of the work that needs to go in to ensure that, if I ask a question about somebody's banking transaction, there's a set of assumptions that I might have because I'm using natural language to make the inquiry, versus if I'm asking about sales of brand cereal in a particular region in stores in the US. The generative AI capabilities and predictive AI capabilities need to be tuned to give me the answer that I know that I want, but that a general purpose AI system wouldn't really know for sure.
Right. Well, because context is so incredibly important, and
Yep.
human beings kind of take context awareness for granted because we're walking around
Yeah,
and we're aware of our
exactly.
context.
Yeah.
But if you just take an automaton and throw it into an ocean of possibilities, there's no telling where it's
Yeah.
going to go. And
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
that's kind of
Exactly.
why these large language models will hallucinate if they get into fringe territory where there's not enough
Yep.
information that they've been trained on in that particular domain, right?
Exactly. And it isn't even hallucination, it's just what are you talking about? Like if I say Southwest, I want to look at sales in the Southwest. Am I talking about a region? Am I talking about a set of stores that's been defined? Am I talking about an airline? Like
Right.
you have to know that information. And as humans, we automatically know because we, as you said, we know the context, but AI doesn't necessarily know that unless you train it.
Right. And, when you talk about domain specificity, this is really important. And what I've seen, and I think it's fantastic, and we've said on the show many times, is that AI will largely manifest in the form of suggestions to the user. And like I started seeing this probably 3 years ago or so in
Mhm.
Gmail, where it would automatically pick certain emails I had not followed up on and suggest, hey, did you want to follow up on this or that? And I was like, actually, that's a
Well,
good.
Eric, that might be a feature that's specific to you. I don't know. I'm kidding. Yeah, no, exactly. Exactly. The idea of understanding, and we talk a lot about this, that we've gone from, as you said, BI tools where you're just trying to understand what happened, where we've sort of moved beyond that to understand what could happen, to do predictions, to do analysis based on what's happened and what's likely to happen. We're sort of right in that point. If you sort of aggregate across all of the applications that we build across the state of the technology,
Right.
we are starting to talk and think about, are there places where it's okay for an autonomous task to happen? If it's always going to be when this condition happens, then this following action needs to happen. Where are those, and are those okay to potentially implement? but but that's from a technology standpoint. From a human being standpoint, we're very much at the point where people are not comfortable seeding AI to do things more than like turn on and off the lights and things like that. We're not quite there yet from a change, a culture where we are just comfort level with the technology.
Right.
And how fast that moves, we'll see. But we are right in that point where we're starting to get much more comfortable looking at the recommendations and the analysis that AI is providing so that we can dig into it if we need to, or we can accept it and keep going.
Well, and it's funny. I love talking to smart people in this space because they remind you of things. And one of the folks I know was reminding me that you're already letting AI guide where you drive. When you use Google Maps, for example, it's coming up with the path,
Yeah.
sending you along your way. And what's interesting is that it's pulling from information that it gets from other phones, like when there's a speed trap or when there's an accident on the
Yep.
highway or something. And it's like all of a sudden, you're like, well, why is it telling me to take a left here? Oh, there's an accident up there is why. So it's like we already
Yeah,
are
and you can make
implicit- yeah,
exactly. You can make the decision to use that information or not,
right.
but at least you know you have another data point to help you make a potentially a better decision. And
That's right.
that's kind of the point in the work world too. We talk quite a bit about the fact that consumer AI is moving along a little faster, partly because the stakes in some cases aren't as high. Whether, Alexa is putting stuff in my Amazon basket or helping me turn on and off the lights or, give me directions and I get to decide. Like we've gotten quite comfortable with many of those things in our personal lives. But in the work world, we're not as far yet because obviously in some cases the risk can be pretty big.
Right.
And so, as you said, there's always got to be a human in the loop. And we need to be able to have comfort being able to dig into the information, to have good AI explainability, to have comfort about the security of our data and the security of our customers' data. Like those are big, real issues that we're still working through.
Yeah, it's important stuff, but I love that you're focused on the co-pilots and you have these domain specific solutions because as you suggest, working in the media is a lot different than being an officer trying to find fraud detection. And what I love
Yeah.
about the AI again is that it can notice things that you miss. And I think that's one of the real value adds. So if you're just going through your job, you're going through dotting the I's, crossing T's, you may forget something, and the AI is going to be right there to go, hey, did you forget to submit that form? Because I noticed it hasn't been submitted yet. It's like, oh, that's right, I forgot.
Right.
My wife called, I went outside, I got distracted.
Right.
AI doesn't care. Like it doesn't,
Yeah.
you know
AI
what
never gets tired.
what cracks me up about it too is how when you use the chat GPT and you give it a question that gives you an answer that's wrong, you go, oh no, I meant this. And it'll go, oh, I'm sorry. Here's the new information. Like it's apologizing to you, right? It's like, oh, okay. It doesn't get mad. It
Yeah.
doesn't get sensitive. It doesn't think you're trying to fire it, it just goes ahead and does the
That's
job,
right.
right?
Yeah, yeah, and actually, I'm glad you mentioned that about firing because there's been a lot of discussion about AI and jobs, and that's a topic that we take really seriously. And that's part of the strategy from our end is to think about where can AI actually add value in a business and free people up to do the things that people are good at and to um, focus on things that, as you said, humans have many, many strengths, but obviously we can get distracted or we can have biases. And so that is where AI, predictive and generative AI, can actually support humans to potentially make better decisions. That's not to say that some jobs won't go away for sure, but those of us who've been in technology and those who predated us have seen many waves of technology enhancement and development where jobs that used to exist don't exist anymore, but the upside is usually a lot bigger than the jobs
Right.
lost.
I agree. And I see you also have a co-pilot in media. And if I recall
Yeah.
correctly, it helps to determine the value of a particular piece of content.
Hmm.
What's
Yeah.
really interesting about this, and I'll just say a couple quick words and then let you respond to that. But we are in this new digital world where you can track things. I think that's the upside is you can track things. The downside is a lot of what you track is not real. It's either bots or just something that's not what you think it is, basically. So you
Yeah.
have to find a way to weight these scores that you get. I'll get one system telling me, oh, there were 400 clicks from this email blast. This system tells me there were 27. I'm like, all right, well, those are two different numbers. I'm pretty sure that there is a real number in there somewhere. I don't know what they are, but at least it's getting you something. You have to balance it out. But what's interesting about being able to score content and the value of content is now as a marketer, that's a very powerful tool to help me figure out what to pay for things in the future and what to expect from things.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. What to pay for it, how to value it, to think about the long tail of content. On the media side, companies like Netflix have spent a lot of time and resources helping consumers figure out, like, if you liked this, then you might like that. There's lots of fun things to say about that. But on the back end, figuring out what's going to be a hit and what could be potentially the maximum value of a piece of content is something that is a very new idea for media companies, and it's a pretty exciting one. As you mentioned, we introduced our Copilot at NAB with Microsoft back earlier this year, and it's a really exciting area because it allows, you're trying to measure an intangible thing, is do people like something or not, but it's a very useful mechanism for people who haven't necessarily had a tool that they could usefully rely on up to now.
Right. Well, and you never know. I mean, I've been in the creative business for a long time now, really my whole career, so 34 years, I guess. And sometimes you can think you've got the best headline, you've got the best subject line, people are gonna love this, and they just like, no bueno. And then sometimes you think,
Yep.
this one's okay, and it just takes off. But to be able to act upon real information for what people like, I mean, that's a content creator's dream, right?
Yeah, and Symphony works on the business side of things. We have sister organizations that work on the healthcare side, and you can think about the potential insights that you can get from looking at really large data sets. Obviously, that's the benefit of AI, is being able to look at incredibly large data sets and figure out what are the insights and implications of that. And so, whether you're looking at industrial data or retail data or banking data or patient healthcare data or media information, there's a lot of information that AI tools can glean, and that can help us, make better business decisions, or in our personal lives, better personal decisions as well.
That's right. Yeah, it's great to learn about yourself, to learn about your own activities. I mean, it can be a little bit creepy sometimes when it reflects back to you. Like, oh, really? Is that who I am? Like, wow.
Oh, I only stood up that many times today? That's pretty
Right.
sad.
That's
Yeah.
that's the depressing side. Like, wait a minute, I walked
Right.
how far? I've been sitting all day. But it is
Right.
another useful piece of information. Well, folks, don't touch that. We're right back. Be right back talking to Symphony AI. You're listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis, talking all things real world Gen AI solutions, generative artificial intelligence. Who's using it? What are they doing with it? Well, a company called Symphony is working on a lot of different technologies. They have eight, I think, different co-pilots or eight different industries and a lot of different co-pilots, which are these little interns. They're like really knowledgeable interns that are there to help you do all your little stuff and get it all done, and they don't get mad at you and they don't show up late. Sometimes we have to reboot the server. I don't know, something may happen, but they're very, very efficient and they just do their jobs and they help us do our jobs. And that's really the key, is a human in the loop and this tandem of person and tool, not just the AI. Don't let the AI run your company, please. Don't do that. Maybe in a few years. But one of the best ways to learn about how these new technologies operate is, drum roll please, to use them and to use them internally. So using it externally, that's a bit of a risk. You got to make sure you're doing the right thing. But to use it internally, that's how your team can figure out the contours of these technologies, what they do, what the rough edges are, what the good parts are, all that fun stuff. And that is one of the things on the docket for Sarah Jolly of Symphony AI. So Sarah, tell us a bit about yourself and a bit about your job in encouraging your team to use AI.
Yes, thank you, Eric. So I manage our global internal communications here at Symphony AI. And as an AI company, of course, we fundamentally believe in the benefits of AI in the workplace. And so we've always known that we have to be the ones to lead by example and really incorporate AI in our everyday jobs, because it helps us be more innovative in our own jobs, but it also really helps us put ourselves in the mindset of our customers so we can internalize some of the challenges, internalize the barriers that our customers might be facing when it comes to adopting AI. So just as you said, by adopting it ourselves, we can really figure those things out. And of course, as a technology company, one of our core values is innovation. But it's not just innovation for us, it's innovation at speed. Because this industry and the technology, it's changing day by day. You see it. It's not happening in months and years anymore. So it's not just enough to be innovative, we have to be faster too. And so by making sure every person at our company is familiar with these AI technology and the capabilities in their day-to-day is one way to do that.
Yeah, that's good stuff. So you have programs internally where you're encouraging your staff to use these tools. I mean, obviously for copywriting and marketing, that's very good for any kind of copywriting, for customer support, for other kinds of low-hanging fruit. Can you talk about some of the ways that you encourage your staff, and is there a mandate that they have to use it for a certain period of time?
Yeah, great question. And so we started about a year and a half ago this program internally called Everyone Can AI, because we believe everyone can AI, everyone can be innovative. It's not just the engineers and it's not just those with technological roles. And in fact, one of our HR team members won our company-wide innovation award back earlier in the year. So we're showing everyone that everyone in the company can AI no matter what your job is. So the Everyone Can AI program, we first started, there's kind of three pillars. There's live learnings, so we do quarterly all-employee live learning, something that is a topic relevant for everyone. And then we do monthly tech meetups, and that's for those people in those technical roles. And we have guest speakers come on and talk about use cases, talk about technologies, talk about tools and applications, different ways that you can be leveraging it for the different parts of the business. Then we have an e-learning pillar, so publishing trainings and those trainings that we think are really good. I think if you are in this space, you know there is an overwhelming amount of information and resources and training out there, and it can be really hard to figure out, like, where do I start? So we publish those for people, give them a place to start. And then we have the third pillar is activities. So things like hackathons, hack your job, dedicated communications channels for people to use and talk about these things and really develop the learnings. So we started with that, this Everyone Can AI program, and now this year what we've done is really formalize it within the company. And so we have, again, kind of two tracks. There is our technological team, and so we've given them a required metric to be using generative AI in their jobs to be better at their jobs. So it's a requirement that you have to use generative AI, but then they take that and they get to figure out, like, okay, how am I going to do that? How am I going to measure it? And then we have monthly report outs on how to do that and the brainstorming along with that. So that's the technical side. And then, of course, we have on the functional side, Everyone Can AI. We have a similar kind of project underway where we, for all of those, what we call back office functions, back office being HR, legal, IT, marketing, similar mandate where we have to be using generative AI within our functions. And then monthly report outs on how we're doing that and the use cases on how we're being more efficient. I think one of the most important things that we've done as a company is we actually released an internal generative AI platform that we can all use. So we don't have to worry about putting, data, sensitive data, company data, confidential data into these open AI tools. We're an AI company, so we've built our own generative AI platform powered by the same technology that powers our external products that every employee can use in their jobs. And so we can use it, it's a safe space internally to be able to practice using it and figure out those use cases.
So you guys, Symphony, actually built your own model, is that right?
That's right.
Cool.
It's very handy.
That is good. Yeah, because you have, like I said, you have to play with these things to kind of understand them. I've played more with the text side than I have with the image side, but the images are good too, but they do have difficulties. I mean, Gemini is the tool that I use as opposed to ChatGPT, or there's another one. I'm forgetting what it's called now, but it's one of the other big ones, midnight something, or I can't remember what it's called. It's crazy the imagery that you can get from this stuff. And it's like, I'm thinking to myself, geez, there are stock image photos like Getty and some of these other guys. They've got to be going, oh no, like what's going to happen now? But I mean, for writing, just to get into the core service offering, these tools are great for just spinning up ideas and really covering a lot of bases. But one thing I point out to folks is that especially these public facing engines like ChatGPT and Gemini, they're really consensus engines, because what they're doing is, you've trained the models on all this text and then they vectorize the words like apple or tree or car or whatever it is. And then there are different permutations of that based upon the context or the other adjectives around it or something. But the point is, that's a vector. So you're taking text, you're turning it into a mathematical formula, and then upon demand, you are turning it back into text. Well, what that means is it's going to give you kind of the average of what it's seen in a space, but it does so in such a syntactically correct, compelling way. You're like, wow, did a person write that? And like the short answer is kind of. Person wrote something like that, but it's not perfect text strings. This was my aha moment with these things. It's not that it's grabbing text and storing it word for word. Rather, when you train the models, it's affecting the weights and biases in the parameters, which can be in the millions, billions, or even now trillions in some cases, which is just wild. But that's what really blew my mind about this stuff. I guess that's one question for you is what really hit you when you started playing with these things that made you go, wait a second, what is it doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think your topic about communications that's obviously my role, internal communications. I do a lot of writing. So I do use our internal generative AI tool to support that. And like you said, it's aggregating everything and giving you something that is kind of the norm, right? And very common. So what I find a lot when I use it for my own internal communications is that it gives me a lot of like business lingo, a lot of business buzzwords, because that's kind of, I think, what it's been trained on and what you see. So I have yet to be able to use the results of that kind of verbatim. There is still a lot of human review that's needed, a lot of work that I still have to do. But what it does is it gives me a great starting point.
Right.
It helps give me great structure on what kind of how I want to structure the pieces that I'm working on. Sometimes I'll pull out like really good sentences, even really good words. It helps me with brainstorming things like email subject lines, how to reword different sections. So it really is just a tool to make my communications even better. And I am trying to work on it, uploading all my own internal communications into our generative AI model, training it on our own corporate tone and style so that it gets better and better, and it can, write communications that are better and better. And when I can finally train it to a point where it does spit out something that I can use verbatim without me having to edit, that's definitely something I'm going to celebrate. I'm going to put that out to the company and say, this was written completely with generative AI. Definitely not there yet, but something that I'm working towards.
Yeah, but that is, I mean, that is the direction things are going. So when you talk about low-hanging fruit for use cases, well, the co-pilots are fantastic. And I already mentioned that obviously you guys, in my opinion, have the exact right idea about how to do that. It's domain specific because in the manufacturing world versus a financial services world versus a media world, not just different buzzwords, but different workflows, different contexts that are common in that industry. So when you have this ontology, a lot of people are working on these things now. There's a company, Praxi Data, there's a company, Shelf IO, I've come across, which is doing real good work in categorizing your unstructured data. And that's kind of the other exciting side of this equation here is that in the business intelligence world, we stripped out all the context to get to the numbers, which then have to be applied to the context, right? Well, a number without any context is meaningless. But in context, it's okay, we sold 5,000 widgets instead of 10,000. That's a problem. Well, now with this Gen AI stuff and with what you're doing in loading documentation into your own model, is you're fine tuning that model to really understand your core business. And the more you do that, the more aligned it becomes with the kinds of things you talk about. It'll use the language you talk about. And the other fun thing is policy too. So these documents are, I mean, you think about reading the instructions. Like when you get like an employee manual and it's 50 pages, how many employees really ever read that? Is it like 1, 2%? Is it 3%? But now if you load that thing into your own model, for example, or even into ChatGPT, you can ask it all kind of questions and get really good answers. So what are you doing? You're expediting time to value, is I think the case. And I'm guessing that is a core mission of your use of Gen AI is expedite time to value, get to the nut faster, get there more efficiently, and get a better product, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you mentioned before content creation and internal communications, also a lot of content creation. There's never going to be, I think, an end to the content that we can create. So if I can create that content faster and faster, it just enables us to put out more and more. And then to Erica's point too, making it better and tailoring that content for different audiences. And so if we can cut down the amount of time that it takes to create that content, we can do it more, we can do it better, and focus on those elements of the job that may be more fun, more enjoyable,
Right.
more
I think
strategic.
That's one of the real keys. And, I'll throw this one out to you. One of my big platform topics is morale and employee morale. And I think morale is the most important quotient of any organization, because when morale is high, good things happen. When morale is low, you can have the best people, a lot of money, a lot of resource, and good things are just not going to happen because people are not in a good mood. So then the question becomes, all right,
Mhm.
what brings mood down, what elevates mood? And what brings mood down is tedious work, boring work, feeling that like you're not getting anywhere, like you're not being listened to, you've got friction points that no one is paying attention to. That brings down morale. And a lot of this AI technology is great at hacking through the weeds and opening up the path so you can have fun walking through the forest instead of hacking weeds off your ankles, right?
Yeah. No, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think there's another element too that this can add to, work satisfaction and morale. And it's just that we see this industry changing so much. Like, you can't open the news these days without seeing a headline about AI. And so it's fun to be a part of that. It's fun to be using these tools internally, so that when you see those articles, you see yourself as part of the conversation. And then, learning, everyone loves to learn, and so really learning how to use these new tools that not everyone is adopting. It's exciting, and it's just exciting to be a part of it. Eric, I listened to I think the podcast that you did last week, and one of your guests said something about, like 90% of leadership say that they're excited about the potential of AI, but only 20% of companies actually have like a formal way to train their people in it. So we're one of that 20%, training people. We have structures in place, and metrics, and ways to encourage and enable people to actually be using AI within their jobs. And it's fun to be a part of it.
Yeah, and that's a great point that you make, because anytime you're running an organization larger than two people, you need to have some kind of process in place and some kind of framework. In fact, one of my other clients was joking just the other day. He said, "Oh yeah, anytime we use the word framework, clients are like, 'Oh yeah, what is that? Tell me about the framework.'" It's like it is a matrix. It's something that is a structure that helps you understand what to do and when. And as long as you have simple instructions and they make sense, then people are going to follow them. I think by and large, people like to follow rules. There's the occasional renegade who just wants to be trouble. Don't hire that person. I mean, maybe sometimes, but most people like to follow rules, but they have to be clear and simple and understandable. And I think that's one of the challenges, that over the years, we've written these tomes about process and protocol and code of conduct and all this stuff like that. People don't want to sit down and read that stuff end to end, and they don't want to, like, remember the glossary? You go in the glossary, oh, where is this thing? Now you're just going to use your Gen AI tool. You're going to load that document into the Gen AI engine, and you're going to sit there and ask it questions. Everyone is fine with that, because guess what? You get right to the answer that you want. You don't have to wade through all the stuff you don't need to get to the stuff you want. And that's one of the big, big aspects that I really love about this Gen AI stuff, and how it's going to change workflows and change our day-to-day lives. But folks, don't touch that. I'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis, talking with Symphony AI, very interesting company doing all sorts of work with artificial intelligence co-pilots, Gen AI. They use it internally, they use it externally. And I'll bring Erica Schroeder back into the conversation. We were just chatting in the break there about manufacturing use cases and industrial use cases, and how lots of folks are leaving those jobs with a lot of head knowledge. And with machinery like that, let's face it, there's a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things. Actually, I should say there's a right way to do things and about 8,000 wrong ways to do things. So it's like,
Yep.
those aren't very good odds. You want to make sure you get it right. And you say that's one of your core strengths with the industrial space, right?
Yeah, and you were alluding to that earlier about ingesting help manuals and instruction manuals and stuff. And any one of us who had to look something up and try and decode and figure out how it works, you know what it's like. You just want the information when you want it. And so one of the advantages of having a co-pilot is that's tuned for the thing that you're trying to do, like fix a machine or tune a machine or whatever, is you can just ask the question in the way that you would ask it, and you can get the information when you need it in a form that maybe you have a follow-up question or whatever, but it's a very natural way to get that information. And that's one of the big, that's an important use case because of what you just said. There's a in manufacturing, there's a generational shift happening of people leaving who've got institutional knowledge and younger workers coming in who need to be trained and have to be trained and don't necessarily have all that information at their fingertips. And so the faster they can get that information, the faster they can fix a problem or tune something and move on. And it has a real impact. But the thing about generative AI is the user interface is so natural. You don't have to think about how am I going to phrase the question? You just ask the question and let the system worry about what the answer is, which is a really big improvement.
Yeah, and then you can curate them over time, right? That's one of the other sides of the equation here, is that you load your policy manuals in, which can be very dense and very hard to understand and even harder to go back and read. And then if you load it into one of these models, there still are edge cases. You still have to be careful about what you're looking at, but by and large, they're very, very good at then just getting you right to the answer that you want. So you don't even have to look in the glossary. You just have to ask the question, how do I restart the server? Basically, it's like, okay, go to this, then hit this, then hit this, then do this. And it's like, oh, okay, that's how I do it.
Yeah, exactly. If the reading I'm getting is this and this other thing and this other thing, what should I do? It's really good at things like that. And we do that for external use cases. So I mentioned manufacturing. We do the same thing in IT. You know, the printer isn't doing something right and I need help, or my email won't open or whatever. You can just post the question and get some actual useful information back. But we also do the same thing internally. Like Sarah was talking about loading up all of our internal communications document into our internal IT, into our internal AI platform. We do the same thing with marketing information. And that frees up marketing people from answering the same questions over and over again, like, where's the PowerPoint template? Is this the latest PowerPoint template? Where do I go for email signatures and stuff like that? Questions that we get a lot. We can just actually provide that information through the tool by tuning it, as well as, and this is the external example to Sarah's internal example. Like, can we have it review our content for style guide adherence or brand identity and things like that, and potentially speed our production of content along externally as well.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, it remembers things. So you may have forgotten 2 or 3 steps in a 25-step process. It won't forget. It'll tell you. It'll give you the little reminder. Say, hey, you haven't sent that form in, you haven't submitted this form or whatever. So, I mean, we really have, it's the new search in a lot of ways is what this Gen AI stuff is. But instead of just giving you some homework to do, which is kind of what traditional Google searches do, it just gives you the answer. And you do have to watch and make sure that it's the right answer, but you always had to watch that anyway. I mean, some of these challenges of accuracy, they're not new. We just sort of expect them to be perfect. Well, it's not going to be perfect. And I think that's one of the things to remember is that, especially with this generative AI stuff, it's all probabilistic in nature because you're converting text to mathematics and then mathematics back to text. So it's going to be a little loosey-goosey, but compared to having some intern come in and try to have this person read the employee manual and figure out what to do, that's just impossible, man. It's just not even happen.
Yeah, well, I will say it's not just text. We use computer vision in a couple of different use cases, but it's ones where sending humans out is not very practical, or to your point earlier, very satisfying. Like in retail, there's something called a planogram, which is basically on a store shelf where the product should be located. So we all know, about the idea of what's at eye level when you walk down a grocery store aisle. And retailers and CPG manufacturers think about that a lot. And the only way to really know if the products that are in any given store adhere to a planogram is by looking at it. And the old-fashioned way to do that was send people down the aisles with clipboards or cameras or whatever, and that's not very satisfying work. And so we can use computer vision to get the same information and then to analyze that centrally and flag things that maybe where a product isn't the right product, or products are turned around, or even don't have the right price or promotion or whatever. And so it's, in that case, it's not just, we're not just looking at text and analyzing text, we're pulling information from images as well.
Yeah, large graphics models, they call them, right?
Yep.
There's a company called
Yeah.
FPT I visited out in Vietnam last year, and they're putting a lot of effort into the industrial side of that, which is
Hmm.
great because then you can just, and I learned about this on a DM radio episode in like 2017 or 2018. A guy from General Motors was talking about how they were working on it such that you just take your phone, turn the camera on and point it at a particular part of the engine, it'll tell you, oh, that's the carburetor, or that's, this exhaust pipe or whatever. So like, oh, this is getting pretty good, right? So
Yep.
it's like
Yeah.
prescriptive, it tells you what's wrong. I mean, you're seeing this in the auto world with fixing things. So you're right, it's not
Hmm.
just text, it's also graphics, and not just graphics for fun, not just imagery for the eye candy and newsletters, but actual recognition of machine parts and what they do and what
Hmm.
model it is.
Yeah.
You want to talk about
Yeah.
troubleshooting, man. If you get the part wrong, man, oh, I'm sorry, we're gonna have to keep your car for another week because they sent the wrong part in. Like, you don't want to hear that stuff.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That exactly. Or looking at stuff coming off of an assembly line for quality control, or
Right.
looking at stuff going out the back door to make sure supply chain shipments are going smoothly, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, we had a guy in the show who was talking about a use case in a manufacturing plant, and they kept wondering why these batches were going bad, and it had something to do with a kind of paint or something that was being put on these things, and then suddenly someone figured out, hey, they was probably machine learning models like, this always happens when the humidity is really high. They're
Yep.
like, oh, wow, that'll do it because too much moisture in the
Yep.
air gets into, the machines and then the paint doesn't spray properly. So it's like, wow, there are all these ways that this information can help you. But just to alleviate concerns out there, folks, I know everyone's saying AI is going to take away jobs. You have to learn to use the technology as a tool in your toolkit to help you get the job done. So it's not so much that AI itself will take away jobs as it is that people who don't learn to use AI are probably going to have a harder time finding jobs, right?
Yeah. Actually, I forget who said it, but there's a famous quote floating around Silicon Valley at the moment about, you're not going to lose your job to AI, you're going to lose your job to somebody who uses AI.
Right. That's right. And it could be younger and it could be older. You never know. It could be anyone. But the fact is these tools are out there. And so that's where the Sarah Jollies of the world come in to encourage employees to use things and have sort of a center of excellence. We got about 40 seconds left. Are you the center of excellence, or do you have some other tools and things that you can share with folks?
I think that's why I love internal communication so much. I wouldn't say I am the expert at all in all of these. I get to learn more about each piece of the company and kind of collate them and be the center of resources for people.
Nice.
So I think just formalizing it, have your people process and technologies documented so people know where to go, is a good tool.
And you're doing the
She
right
just
thing.
described as a center of excellence. She's
Yeah, that's
underselling
right.
herself.
That is. That is a center of excellence. And when you load the documentation in there, like I said, it gets closer and closer to the truth. And with a layer of metadata, you can get some recency bias baked in. So you get the most recent version instead of the version from 2 years ago. I'm sure many people have gone online. How do I do X, Y, or Z? And they get an old version like, well, there's that item isn't in the menu. I don't know what they're talking about. But don't touch that down, folks. We'll be right back with the podcast bonus. You're listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, time for the podcast bonus segment here on Inside Analysis. We're talking to Erica Schroeder and Sarah Jolly from Symphony AI. And Erica, I'll throw it over to you. These co-pilots, I love co-pilots. They're your little incredibly knowledgeable interns that never sleep. They've been trained on all the information that you're supposed to know, so you can ask them all kind of stuff. And they're there to just to remind you of things and to suggest to you certain things. And I think you were saying that
Mhm.
your co-pilots are built with old-fashioned AI and new-fashioned AI, right?
Yeah, yeah. But that's something we talk about quite a bit, which is the we think the right recipe is a combination of predictive AI, or as you called it, old AI,
Old-fashioned.
and
Right.
generative AI. And, we talked about some of the use cases already. So being able to understand what happened and what's likely to happen, and then using generative AI for that natural language interface so you can ask a question any way you want. But being able to, that assumes a few things. That assumes generative AI models, predictive AI models, and a whole bunch of data. And so that we haven't really talked about our underlying technology. Sarah talked about our own internal platform. The version of that we make externally available is called Eureka, and that is a complete AI platform. We don't sell it per se as a general platform you can buy and build your own applications on it, but it's at the core of the applications we sell, and it has an intelligent data layer, so connects to all the data sources that are relevant for the particular use cases for applications and copilots we sell. It has a predictive AI layer with all the models and capabilities, and it has a generative AI layer with all the skills and knowledge graphs and everything else. And then the thing that's kind of different for us lately is spending a lot of time on the UI UX, because as you pointed out, this is such a new area that making sure that we have the right interfaces for people to be able to interact with text data, graphics data, interpretive charts and visuals and things like that is really, we think that's a really important aspect of this that helps with usability. And as we talked about at the beginning, like for people to be able to use AI in their jobs, it's got to be something that fits in their workflow anyway.
Right.
If it's too much of a leap to go outside your workflow to get information, then it's not something that you're going to naturally use every day.
Right.
And that's one of the cool things about generative AI is it's kind of given the power to interpret that information directly to the end user.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad you're focused on the UI too. And I remember watching as the mobile revolution fundamentally
Yeah.
changed user interface, because you had a much smaller
Yeah.
real estate, right? So you had to be much more careful about how you
Yep.
presented menus and what they look like. And I think some of those kids get a little bit creative on all the swipe up, swipe down, swipe sideways. I mean, half the times when I'm using my phone, I do something I didn't mean to do on some of these media sites. No, I'm not trying to change to a different application. I just want to see inside this application. But I'm an old timer. I'm sure
Yeah.
the kids are more savvy with that. But
Well, I mean, we've all been through this where there were desktop apps that we would try and use on our phones and they did not work very well, and we had to redesign the same application so that it worked well on a phone. It's exactly the same idea with AI, is we're sort of going through that cycle of lots of experimentation, lots of innovation, and 2, 3, 10 years from now, we'll all look back and go, oh, remember when?
yeah,
But AI will just become another tool that we all think about as part of our getting our jobs done, as opposed to like a special thing that we're talking about AI today.
right. Well, and Sarah, I'll throw this last question over to you. What's interesting, to Erica's point now, is we are going through a metamorphosis right now. I mean, this is a major shift in how we use applications, how we generate content, how we interact with customers and with each other. Lots and lots of things are changing. And it's exciting, but it's also a little bit, just nerve-wracking, I guess, to know that everything is changing. But at the end of the day, it's still going to be people using technologies to do things. You just have to kind of keep an open mind. Is that part of your mantra working with your employees, is to help them keep their minds open about different ways to do things?
Yeah, that's exactly right. If you think about it, we have about 3,000 people working here, and those 3,000 people are going to have 3,000 different use cases for generative AI. So on our side, what we have to do is how do we programmatically implement the use and the learning of generative AI for those 3,000 different people? Each person needs something different. Each person has a different use case. And so how can we design the program and the learning and the structure to really enable them to be able to learn and experiment and practice with generative AI? And so it is exciting, and it's new.
Well, and you really can learn a lot. Like I was saying earlier, for any topic that has been widely published, and therefore you can assume these models have been trained on them, These things are very good at breaking down the component parts of a topic, like anything about wildlife or anything about basic manufacturing, how computers work, stuff that has been widely published. There is a ton of information. So that vector space is very rich and full and complete. And then depending upon the prompt you give it, you can get a lot of different ways to answer the question, but the information is pretty darn good. That's what I found. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty good. And of course, always with the human review, have a human being to kind of verify it. I think sometimes also these large language models don't have access to all of the information.
Right.
You think about some of the research that our people have to do. Sometimes that research it might be behind a paywall. It's not publicly available. So you can't rely on it for everything. I think research is one of those challenging areas where you can't just rely on a generative AI answer for it. Sometimes you have to go find other firsthand sources to be taking into consideration, but then using generative AI to help summarize that and glean some insights. So there's lots of different use cases, lots of different opportunities there. We just have to go find them.
I love it. Well, folks, look these ladies up online. We've been talking to Erica Schroeder and Sarah Jolly from Symphony AI. Very, very cool company doing some great stuff in the AI world. They're using it. They're drinking their own champagne, as they say out there in the real world. And they've got their own AI model. There's a few companies I've come across who have done that. Lots of value. I'm glad to hear that because as some of you know, in my executive cockpit concept, that's what I'm suggesting is you get a small language model, train it on every single thing you've got so it really understands the nuances of your business, all the lingo, the terminology. And it's like you can learn so much from the smart people in your company. That's the other really, really cool thing about this is that from a sales perspective, for example, you can look at the corpus of communications from that one key salesperson to figure out how is this person doing this? How is she getting all these great sales? You can get some insight from that and then share it with the team. And then you all benefit from that collective corporate knowledge, which you should, because you should benefit from the knowledge of every person in your company. And I think this AI stuff is really going to finally get us there. So if you want to be on the show, send me an email, info@insideanalysis.com. You've been listening to Inside Analysis.